Good afternoon and welcome back to your Afternoon 5-State Farm Report. Danielle Drotzman, your host here for 570 WNAX. Happy Friday and thanks for tuning in here today. Want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, DeSmet Farm Mutual Insurance, Fordyce Co-op, and Total Auctions and Real Estate for bringing you the Afternoon 5-State Farm Report. So with that, here this week, we have definitely been seeing some hot temperatures. I feel like that has been the talk. Almost every person I've called this week to do an interview or whatever is just, hope you're staying cool. Hope you're staying cool. It's hot out there. Don't wander too far from the air conditioning. So, I mean, it's no joke. It is hot. And USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey has said that we have seen some recent record temperatures in Montana and also other parts of the northern U.S. this week.
When this peaked across the northern Great Plains on Sunday, we came very, very close to an all-time state temperature record in Montana. Just to put this in perspective, the all-time high temperature record for Montana, as verified by the Department of Commerce, 117 degrees. That was set back during the Dust Bowl era, July 5th of 1937, in a town called Medicine Lake. Now, flash forward to this week, and over the weekend, Sunday, we saw a temperature not yet verified of 116 degrees on the high plains of Montana. And then among official observing sites, we have confirmed 115 in Miles City in eastern Montana. That is an all-time record for that location. Previously, 111 set back in late June of 2012. That's not the only station to break an all-time record. We've got a number of other communities in Montana that achieved that on Sunday, July 12th. And a very short list includes Billings, Montana, 111, Livingston, Montana, tying an all-time record, 105.
So maybe at the moment we're just glad we don't live in Montana because it seems like they're having some very extreme temperatures there. And Justin Glisson, he is a state climatologist for Iowa, says this is all because of a heat dome.
Yep, so we've had a heat dome set up over the southeastern part of the United States, and that has just sat over top of most parts of Iowa, getting into eastern South Dakota, Nebraska, and southern parts of Minnesota. So with that, at least the earlier part of the heat dome, about a week to 10 days ago, we had what we call ridge riders around that heat dome, and those are disturbances that move around the periphery that produce heavy rainfall. And in fact, parts of central getting into western Iowa had anywhere from 8 to 12 inches of rainfall over a 36-hour period. So a lot of that rain floods fields. It also runs off into our stream systems. So we don't get a lot of soaking in of that rainfall, particularly when the soil profile at the top is saturated. But looking at, the warmth that we've seen recently, I look back at last June, and we had a period of time across the upper Midwest between June 20th and the 22nd in which we had these similar type temperatures in the 90s, along with dew points in the 70s, getting up into the upper 70s, kind of what we've seen in the recent heat dome, along with very strong southerly winds, which we haven't seen. And with those three things back in last June, many stations seeing those three meteorological components come together, those are conditions that we haven't seen in the observational record. So last June was kind of a black swan event versus what we're seeing over the last few weeks here in the upper Midwest.
And I know corn and beans and all of our crops most of the time are made to handle this heat, but they can't handle it very well if it doesn't rain. So I guess USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey goes over how some of this heat could affect our corn and bean crops.
Although just on the edge of stressful heat for corn and soybeans shouldn't cause too many concerns. The crop, if it is into reproduction across that region for corn and soybeans, just starting to enter that stage of development. And we have pretty ample soil moisture across the northern corn belt, so we're not expecting this to be a long-lived heat wave, just a couple of days above 95 degrees. And I think the corn and beans will make it through okay. Ironically, the southern corn belt is staying favorably cooler, comparatively speaking, with temperatures mostly in the upper 80s to lower 90s. So again, they're not seeing any real concerns for corn or soybeans, with the heat staying focused further north and largely outside of the corn belt as we go to the Canadian border and a little bit beyond.
And according to the latest crop progress report that was on Monday, some of this heat could bring some potential impacts on our spring wheat crop.
The entirety of the crop now headed out in Washington State, but running a bit slow in Montana at 41% headed. 5-year average is 63%. For this crop, we did see some incredible heat moving across the spring wheat production areas very late in the week. It is likely that any impact from that heat, 100 to 110 degrees plus, will not be reflected until at least next week's report. That should, however, help with some of that delayed crop development in Montana and elsewhere on the northern high plains. Meanwhile, spring wheat condition coming in this week, 58% good to excellent. That's up marginally from last week's 57%, 10% very poor to poor. That is also up from last week's 7%. And we're sitting fairly similar to where we were this time a year ago when the crop was 54% good to excellent, 13% very poor to poor. We do have some double-digit very poor to poor numbers coming in from Washington State this week, 17%. Also from Montana at 14% and Idaho at 10%. And we will just have to wait and see the impact of this heat, which is expected to last for several more days on spring wheat across the northern plains.
Well, what's in store for next week? Are we going to see some cooler temperatures?
Taking a look at the National Weather Service 8 to 14-day outlook that almost finishes off July for us, takes us from the 21st through the 27th. In time, it looks like we will see some cooler air starting to push into the country from the north and east. What that means for July 21st through 27th is we should see a return to near normal temperatures across the northern plains, the Midwest, and the Northeast, which happens to be the areas that are the hottest right now. That heat will be pushed south and west, so we expect above normal temperatures throughout the western U.S. and across the south. In terms of precipitation, with that subtle pattern change, we expect to see quite a bit of moisture, some of that related to the monsoon, some of that related to other disturbances. Near or above normal rainfall expected across the country. Areas expecting the greatest likelihood of wetter than normal conditions will be the middle and northern Atlantic states, and much of the west related to a much more active monsoon circulation.
All right, there is a look at some of the weather that we've been seeing this week and maybe what's expected for next week. So we'll have to stay on our toes and just see what happens. So with that, that kind of concludes our program here for the week and for the days. So hope you guys all have a great weekend. Thanks for tuning in. And as I've heard it all week, I'll tell you guys, stay cool out there. For WNAX, I'm Danielle Drotzman.